Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the press conference following the first day of the informal ECOFIN meeting. On the works of the meeting will brief you the Finance Minister, Stournaras, Mr. Vitor Constantiou, Vice President of the European Central Bank, and the Commissioner responsible for Internal Market and Services, Mr. Michel Barnier. Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to welcome you all in Greece, and I wish you enjoy your stay in this country. Let me debrief you on our discussions at today's working lunch, as well as at the first ECOFIN working session. At our working lunch, we were debriefed by the Eurogroup President on the Eurogroup meeting held this morning, where the main topic was Greece. As you know, you have been briefed by Mr. Dijsselbloem before. Then we discussed Europe's social problem and its implications for economic growth. Gundram Wolf and Zwolt Darvas from Bruegel presented to us the research paper, which confirms the link between poverty and unemployment on the one hand and economic growth on the other. We had a fruitful discussion on how fiscal sustainability is negatively affected by social problems, as well as on concrete measures to be taken to address persistent unemployment and social insecurity, which constitute a major problem for the European Union, especially today. During our first ECOFIN working session this afternoon, ministers and governors discussed the economic outlook, growth prospects and financial stability in the European Union. The EFC chairman, Thomas Wieser, debriefed us on the outcomes from the recent financial stability table, which were also outlined in the letter sent to us last week. Olli Rehn provided us with Commission's views on the economic situation and financial stability. Mario Draghi, the ECB President, also outlined the situation, especially regarding financial stability. After our constructive discussion, I can say that the macroeconomic situation is improving, but that we should not be complacent. Sustainable growth that tackles unemployment and social challenges will continue to depend on growth-friendly fiscal consolidation and structural reforms. Also, a fully functional banking union is essential to restoring confidence and lending to the economy, and it is crucial for the resilience and stability in the financial system. Tomorrow, as you know, we will have the opportunity to discuss this topic in greater detail. We also had a very fruitful and constructive discussion and exchange of views on the Commission communication on long-term financing of the economy, adopted on the 27th of March, and on the high-level experts group report on SMEs and infrastructure financing with the title Finance for Growth, which has been published on 11th December 2013. SMEs funding is crucial for fostering growth, as they are the backbone of the European economy. Just a few words to these very important documents. After a series of consultations and further analytical work, the Commission adopted last week a new communication to progress reflections and initiatives on key work strands. In addition, a high-level experts group was set up under the co-chairing of Alberto Giovannini and John Morano. The high-level experts group provided us with a final report on the 11th of December last year, as I have already said, but their recommendations had already been assessed and discussed with Member States, especially in the Economic and Financial Committee, the EFC. In this context, we took stock of public and private initiatives at national level to improve access to capital markets in light of the high-level expert group final recommendations, and examined outstanding issues and public responses both at the European Union and national levels. Overall, there was broad support among the Member States for the actions presented by the Commission in its communication and the recognition that we can do more at national level as there is a wealth of best practices to be followed and in any case national initiatives which we need to learn from. We asked the EFC and FSC to monitor progress on both these work strands, noting in particular that the FSC has undertaken a review of Member States' practices and initiatives on SME financing and encouraged them to further extend their survey of the state of play in cooperation with the Commission. Finally, and as far as the preparation of the IMF World Bank spring meetings and the G20 finance ministers meeting on the 10th and 11th of April in Washington is concerned, we endorsed the European Union terms of reference and the International Monetary and Finance Committee, the IMFC statement, which focuses on the economic situation and the outlook, policy challenges to strengthening economic recovery in the European Union, progress in financial regulation, and especially IMF policy issues. Thank you.
Yes. Commissioner Barnier, please. You have the floor.
Thank you, and good afternoon to all of you. If I may, I will switch to French, thanks to the interpreters. And my first word would be to thank the Greek presidency and Yanis pour le travail extrêmement efficace de toute l'équipe de la présidence dans notre domaine financier en particulier. L'un des résultats les plus importants obtenus grâce à l'engagement du ministre grec des Finances en particulier aura été l'accord il y a quelques jours fondamental sur l'union bancaire et le deuxième pilier de l'union bancaire avec le mécanisme européen de résolution. Et c'est dans ce contexte très volontariste et très proactif que nous nous retrouvons à Athènes pour cette réunion informelle des ministres. J'ai eu l'occasion, avec Olli Rehn, mon collègue et ami, de présenter aux ministres et aux gouverneurs la communication, le plan d'action que la Commission met sur leur table et celle du Parlement européen pour le financement de l'économie dans le moyen et le long terme. Nous avons, mesdames et messieurs, beaucoup travaillé depuis 4 ans pour tirer les leçons de la crise, remettre un cadre de régulation efficace, de telle sorte qu'aucun produit, aucun service, aucun acteur des marchés financiers n'échappe à une régulation publique et à une supervision efficace. J'ai presque terminé ce travail avec les ministres et avec le Parlement européen pour bâtir des bases saines, solides, plus transparentes, remettre aussi de la morale là où elle avait disparu, mettre les marchés financiers dont nous avons besoin au service de l'économie réelle plutôt que d'être à leur propre service. Et je sais que tout ce travail de régulation
this regulatory work has also been accompanied by a major effort in each and every country, especially here in Greece. Citizens, families in Greece have been asked to make a great effort. The crisis has created a lot of suffering and major difficulties. But the economy is now picking up again, now recovering, and we've constructed and put together this framework of regulation to draw our lessons from the crisis to protect taxpayers. Is that enough in terms of regulation? I don't believe so myself. What we now have to do is to accelerate the recovery, and to accelerate you need fuel. Businesses, consumers need to find credit, money to fund their projects. And that's the subject we wanted to discuss today by this communication and action plan. There is a huge need in Greece, as indeed in other EU countries. Together with my colleagues, we worked out this is as much as €1 trillion between now and 2020 over the next 6 years. That is the needs for funding €1 trillion for transport infrastructure, energy infrastructure, digital infrastructure. We've also seen what difficulties are facing our businesses. A few weeks ago, I was here in Athens already, together with Mr. Manaki, and we met with many heads of small and medium-sized businesses in the agri-food sector, in the tourism sector, in the maritime economy, shipping, and I was struck by just how dynamic people are and the desire to get projects going, but the difficulty to find the money to do that. And if you look at the figures, you can see that there's a degree of injustice within the same single market and within the same euro area. 33% of Greek companies, 50% of Spanish companies or Italian companies have managed to get all the loans they applied for in 2013, but 85% in Germany. Those are the figures, they speak for themselves. On the same market, we have a situation. That's why we've been establishing the banking union, to recreate the conditions of a real common banking market, not 18 separated banking markets juxtaposed alongside each other with so many differences. Now, alongside these problems and these needs to find money in business, there's also major opportunities we have identified in the insurance sector, pension funds, private savings too. There's plenty of money there. So, if you look at these in parallel, on one hand, problems and needs, and on the other hand, the opportunities, the possibilities, then you find a number of areas where the Commission is ready to get involved in, if ministers want that, together, of course, with the help of the European Central Bank, as always, and with the European Investment Bank, too. So, briefly, let me recall the chapters of this action plan. Firstly, we'll continue to pay great attention to technical standards and the implementation of prudential rules and regulations that go on banks and insurance companies, so everything is well calibrated and in such a way as to encourage long-term investment. That's the case for solvency, it's the case for capital requirements for banks. Secondly, I did mention private savings. We're going to analyze all the systems of savings books in those member states where they exist, Italy, Germany, everywhere really, and see if in addition to that, we can, in addition I stress, propose a European savings book which would enable us to collect together, with some guarantees, some private saving to direct that towards innovation and small and medium-sized businesses. Thirdly, we want to get public investment banks to work better together. That's national investment banks, also European Investment Bank, EIB, the president of which, Werner Hoyer, was alongside us, as always, today. Fourthly, we want to make capital markets more accessible for small and medium-sized businesses. I mentioned this problem just now. In Europe, 75% of the economy hitherto has been financed by banks, by loans. And in a European market, which is too fragmented, and that leads to injustices and the differences I was just describing. Now, we need to continue to count on the support of banks and to ask them to do their job by lending to the economy. But I think we can diversify. And one way you can diversify is to make markets for capital more accessible to small and medium-sized businesses. And that's why the MiFID regulation, which has been adopted, we wish to promote financial markets which give a special treatment that offers special products to small and medium-sized businesses. Then securitization has been mentioned also on a number of occasions, and in particular by the European Central Bank, as one possible tool, subject to all due precautions, to fund small and medium-sized businesses in a serious way. And together with the European Central Bank then, and with EIOPA, the European Authorities for Insurance and Pension Funds, work together to create a clear distinction, an objective, rigorous distinction between good securitization, which we should use, and bad securitization, which we need to avoid. Let us not forget the damage that all that caused, in particular in the US not so long ago. So transparency, standardization of products, rigor on how underlying assets are qualified. Those are the subjects we want to work on so as to bring out good and robust securitization. I finally wish to promote greater visibility for investors in infrastructure projects. There are investors in Europe, but investors outside of Europe, the Chinese, the Gulf states, we like to make it easier for them to understand what the European needs are by setting up a single portal which would give them all the information about the profitability of infrastructure projects so as to facilitate their committing to them. In last Wednesday's communication, I also presented the framework for all the work we want to do for facilitating crowdfunding. There are 470,000 small projects have been funded out of crowdfunding, which is a participatory form of funding. And that's worth encouraging, whilst providing some guarantees to those who create crowdfunding platforms and for those who put their money to that. And we'll present a directive revising the 2003 directive on professional pension funds to consolidate their transparency and good governance. So, Yanis, those are all the things which are in this communication and which I presented to ministers. And now we shall be working on these various chapters with my colleagues Olli Rehn and Antonio Tajani.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Constancio, Mr. Vice President, the floor is yours.
Yes, yes, thank you. Well, as Minister Stornaras said, we discussed among governors and ministers the economic situation, the financial stability issues in Europe, and finally the financing of the economy, both concerned with the small and medium-sized enterprises and infrastructures. I will say brief words on each of these 3 points. On the economic situation, the main point is to underline that now we have had 3 quarters of positive growth in the euro area in particular, and that our leading indicators show that the first quarter of this year will also be very likely positive. So there is a recovery, although a soft recovery, and there are downside risks, not just because we may have shocks coming from geopolitical events that no one can predict, of course, but also because there are risks of a reversal of the compressed risk premia in the bond market, and this would increase yields and would complicate the recovery. There is also a deceleration of growth in the emerging countries, which no one knows but can be aggravated, and that would be a downside risk that we face in terms of the external demand directed to Europe. And also because there is still a lot of deleveraging and balance sheet repair that is going on, not only banks but also households, not so much firms. Non-financial firms are in the better position, and the big ones are even cash rich. But there is still deleveraging going on. All that creates a drag on the recovery and creates potential downside risks. But right now, what we can conclude is there is a recovery that is being consolidated. Second, on inflation, we had this recent figure of 0.5, and the prospect for inflation is cause of concern, of course, because it seems to indicate that Europe can be, and in particular the euro area, in a protracted period of low inflation. And that in itself, in a situation where economic agents and sovereigns have a big debt overhang, can constitute a drag on the recovery. But in any case, it's important to also underline that we see no deflation prospects. In the sense that this regime of low inflation could lead to a real deflation, meaning a broad general decrease in prices that would create a set of new problems that, as we have seen in the experience of Japan, are difficult to overcome. So we don't expect that at all, and we expect indeed that the low figure of inflation in March will be corrected to a high figure already in April. So, nevertheless, the low inflation regime is certainly a cause of concern. On financial stability, the main thing is that the financial markets have improved a lot in Europe, benefiting from an improvement in fundamentals of the countries, and that includes also the stressed countries that were able to make significant adjustments in their public finance, in their external accounts. They are now growing, so all that has improved the fundamentals, and that explains the improvement in financial markets, but also because Europe has benefited from the outflow that since last year exists away from emerging economies, and we have had a lot of capital inflows coming into European assets. And that has, of course, improved the situation, in particular of sovereign debt. So that is certainly improvement. Banks are still leveraging and are still preparing themselves for our comprehensive assessment that will be concluded in October. And preparing for that, they are cleaning up their balance sheets, they are increasing capital, increasing provisions. As a result, they are less profitable right now as a result of the increase in costs in provisions, but they are preparing for the exercise. And this, in a way, means that this pro-cyclical effect this year was unavoidable, but that's in the name of cleaning up and repairing the balance sheet of banks that from November onwards can really be in a more comfortable position to finance the economy and to increase and consolidate the recovery. Finally, on financing the economy, it's something that also we don't ignore in the Eurosystem, in the ECB, and we have been, for instance, collaborating with the Commission and with the European Investment Bank in the initiative of issuing ABSs, securitizing loans to SMEs. The initiative is now paused because there are problems to be solved, but we have discussed, and as Commissioner Barnier just said, our collaboration will indeed arrive at something, and what the Commission today explain in terms of their communication is also pointing to important changes. On ABSs, at the same time, we have ourselves reduced the haircuts on the more simple and transparent ABSs. We have sponsored the creation of a database that identifies all the assets that are behind those securities, which is very important, and we have also reduced our demand in terms of the initial rating that the ABSs have to comply with to be considered as eligible collateral for our monetary operations. At the same time, some time ago, we also began to accept as collateral direct loans by the banks to firms, small loans, small firms, and that's also an initiative that can be considered broadly in this context of funding for lending. And these are the contributions that the central bank can indeed provide for this concern that exists in Europe with financing the economy and particularly financing the SMEs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Yes. Well, I feel obliged to reciprocate to Michel his kind words about the Greek presidency, and I can tell you that the Commission was of great help, the Eurogroup was of great help, especially Jeroen Dijsselbloem, and the Parliament was of great help. And it was a perfect example of collective work that we managed to bring forward together. And to say that we have completed or are very close to complete perhaps the most ambitious project, the banking union. So I would like to reciprocate Michel's kind words and say that this wouldn't have been possible without the contribution of the Commission and the contribution of Jeroen Dijsselbloem. And also to make you aware that certain strands that we have and certain progress we have made in capital markets regulation, for instance, MiFID, are very close connected with the work on SMEs that Michel and the Commission are doing. For instance, the standardization of products that Michel spoke about is very closely related to the progress we have made on the MiFID.
Now we are ready to take your questions. Please state your name and your affiliation, and also the person you are directing your question to. Yes, down there, please, on the sixth row.
John O'Donnell from Reuters with a question for Mr. Constancio. You talked about the challenge of low inflation. What is the potential solution for this problem at a time when very many of the ECB's possibilities or tools seem to be reduced in their effectivity? And a question also to Minister Stonalis about a discussion point today at your meeting of ministers about social inequality and the pain suffered by certain groups in society from austerity. Would you like to comment on that and what perhaps the significance of that debate is, particularly in Greece?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Well, I perhaps should have started as President Draghi this morning by saying that I would not answer questions about monetary policy because we are going to have our Governing Council meeting on Thursday. And that's, of course, the moment to speak about that. May I say only on your question that, of course, inflation going forward will also be affected by the recovery itself. If indeed the recovery consolidates, it means that the slack in the economy is reduced, and that will help in that score. But on monetary policy, I'm not going to comment. Thank you.
Are you going to comment on that? No. Please. Yes, in the middle, on the 8th row, I think.
Thank you. Peter Spiegel with the Financial Times. A question for Finance Minister Stonaris. I know this was something that was discussed in the Eurogroup this morning, but we haven't heard from you yet on the decision to go ahead and provide the tranche to Greece. I wonder if you could just give us your thoughts on how long that took and if there's any sense of relief that's now done. The other thing that Mr. Dijsselbloem said this morning was that the program is now fully financed through the end of 2014. There is only 1.8 billion, I think, left in the Eurozone portion of that. Can you give us a sense of where you think that extra money is going to come from? I know you've talked publicly about potential bond offering this year, some other things. Can you sort of give us an up-to-date sense of where you think Greece will find the extra money? Thank you.
Well, indeed, the conclusion of the review is a relief, both for us and the Troika and myself. It was a difficult review because it included many issues from fiscal to structural reform to banking issues, but we managed, I think, to finalize it in the best possible way. And I'm really very, very pleased with the excellent cooperation we have with the Troika. It took us a long time, but I think the end result satisfied us all, and especially the Greek people. Now, on the all the elements are in place so that Greece has fully, or rather fully satisfies the condition that finances are in place for the next 12 months. I mean, from from the higher primary surplus we have, much higher. Just to remind you that we planned in 2013 to have a zero primary surplus. It turned out to be close to 2.5 billion. To the repos we can do with general government organizations. So all this together, the privatization revenue, all this together make up the necessary funding for the next 12 months. And a small issuance of bonds, 3 or 5-year bonds, in the first semester. Somehow, in the first semester of 2014, will also contribute to the financing needs of Greece.
Thank you. Next question, please. The lady there.
Ονομάζομαι Μαρίνα Κουρμπέλα και ευχαριστούμε για την ηλεκτρονική ευκαιρία.
Marina Bubella, Alethioρα. Mr. Barnier, the following question. The recommendation for a second chance that was published recently for companies, enterprises that have bankrupted legally could be a relief for many businessmen that were forced because of the crisis to close down their enterprises. Could this develop into some regulation or directive? Then you mentioned new means for financing the European economy. We have 960 billion for the 7-year programming period. What could the European Union use from these new sources?
One question, please. Sorry.
Je ne vois pas le point que vous évoquez concernant.
Well, I'm not sure I get your point about any new text or document about bankrupt companies. Anyway, if anything of that ilk has come out, it certainly wasn't something I was responsible for. Perhaps I can try to find out from you exactly what you're referring to. Perhaps there's my colleague who deals with business, Mr. Tajani. Maybe you're referring to something he said. There's nothing in my program or in the pipeline of my program that touches in any way upon what you seem to be alluding to. Now, as to your second question, if I got it correctly, it is possible that we might leverage some of the structural funds in a way that would help kickstart growth and revitalize the economy again. There's a lot of money that's needed, for instance, for those investments I talked about. There's 1 billion estimated required for transport, for energy reform, and for electricity grid development, which could come from those European funds, as I said. Other funds could come from the EIB's new sources, PPPs, public-private partnerships, or another way forward too. When I was in Athens earlier, we also talked about a special program for SMEs, which the EIB funds in a special way, with a sort of guarantee, which itself is based on the structural funds of which Greece is a recipient. So, Madam, there are many mechanisms which we can use, but at the heart of all this, there's the banking union, because that's going to break down the Chinese walls between our different banking systems, and we'll have a real single banking market. And that's the revolution, and that's why I was hailing the success, the results of the already under the Greek presidency and with the Eurogroup and President Dijsselbloem's very forceful leadership, which is bearing this revolution, which will truly make it possible for businesses to deal with the need for funding. Thank you.
Μια ερώτηση για τον κύριο Στουρνάρα. A question to Mr. Stournaras, a question related to the Eurogroup. Mr. Dijsselbloem, during the previous press conference at midday, spoke about 6+6 prior actions which were necessary in view for July. Can you please name them to us?
Για τη μεγάλη for the large installment of the 8.3 billion, the prior actions are included in the draft law that we have just voted in the Parliament. So this is 90% of the prior actions. Now, for the smaller installments, the 1+1, will have 6 milestones each, which will be drawn from the MOU, that is from the agreed measures. So that's this is not something additional. So they will be they're chosen by the Commission from the MOU. So the Commission will choose which milestones will set as a precondition. I don't know them exactly what they are, but there are going to be 6 for the first installments and another 6 for the second one, taken from the MOU. The milestones is a business of the Commission. It's not a business of the IMF or the ECB.
The second row, please. Thank you.
J'ai des questions pour Monsieur le Commissaire.
Question for the Commissioner, Commissioner Barnier.
Michel Barnier, 4 années après la mise en place du premier plan
4 years after the first plan was
beaucoup pensent et
set
beaucoup
up,
disent que la Grèce aura besoin d'un
many say that yet another plan will be needed for Greece. The President of the Eurogroup said that it's too early to talk about anything like that, but that it's a realistic idea. So what do you think? Do you think that more help would be needed for Greece or a new plan of some sort? You also said recently, I think, to the Journal du Dimanche, the French newspaper,
3 jours avant les élections pour
this
le
was
parti
just before the elections, of course, that at the European level, that growth needs to be restarted. Does that mean you think we've gone too far down the path of austerity right now?
Ne m'en veuillez pas, mais je ne vais pas vous faire une réponse différente.
Well, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to say anything different to you now than what Olli Rehn said or what the Eurogroup chair said, because they're the ones who have responsibility in this area. They have to accompany the effort of Greece, the brave efforts of Greece, and the reform program that's been ongoing for several years now. And it's their task to accompany the government in this reform program. These reforms, these sacrifices, are bearing fruit. Greece is now on the right track, and that's what I'm going to say now, and that justifies the decisions we've taken now in terms of disbursements program for Greece. I have said, and I do believe, that now that we've rebuilt financial stability, we can move on. You can't have growth if you've got financial instability. That's where the crisis came from. So we had to rebuild stability. We had to build a regulatory framework for financial products, for banks, for all financial stakeholders. We've been doing that for the last 4 years with the ministers, with the central bank, and with the parliament. Now the time has come to take initiatives, and I've already done some of that as part of the long-term finance initiative. And for the last 3 years, we've done a number of things to make the internal market work better, and we need to build on that. A country like yours has a lot to do in the internal market. Tourism, maritime and shipping companies, agricultural products, they all have obvious outlets with 500 million European citizens who are consumers in the same market as you. Regarding austerity, and effort and the balance between budgetary structuring and everything else, I said that we need a differentiation. And I was one of the first in Brussels to say that. Differentiate by country and over time in terms of the spread of effort. This is what we are doing in all the countries that have problems. Each has to do what is needed to reduce their deficit. You can't build growth on the back of deficit. But I do believe in a differentiation, which Olli Rehn is now proposing and implementing.
Last question, please. Over there.
Jorge Valero from Europolitics. A quick question for Mr. Constancio. You said that there is no risk of deflation, but looking at the recent data from Spain, prices fell on the fastest annual pace since 2009, if I'm not mistaken. Are you particularly concerned about the price evolution in the southern countries, especially if no monetary policies are taken?
Well, of course, any number of that sort raises concerns, but again, we have to interpret correctly these bottom that the numbers for March indicate, and we should not draw immediate conclusions for the near future about inflation in Spain or in other stressed countries. We have seen that this has happened for short period of time in other stressed countries, but then inflation rebounded, and we don't anticipate with the consolidation of the recovery, provided that the downside risks I enumerated will not materialize, that the consolidation of the recovery will indeed draw inflation upwards, including in Spain. And the fact that now Spain is enjoying growth is an important factor in that direction.
We are running out of time. We have to wrap it up. Thank you very much for your participation in the press conference.